Dr. Sylvia A. Earle is a National Geographic explorer in residence. She has authored more than 200 publications, led more than 100 expeditions with over 7,000 hours underwater, and has been an active public speaker, an advocate for ocean exploration, education, planetary health, and sustainability in more than 100 countries. She has been the recipient of more than 150 national and international honors and awards, including being named Time Magazine's first Hero for the Planet and a Living Legend by the Library of Congress. Deborah Lair is a global business strategist who has provided advice to leading global firms and organizations in some of today's most complex markets around the world. Deborah has applied her business acumen and policy knowledge to launch the Antiquities Coalition, which works with governments across the Middle East to fight against antiquities trafficking and its use in funding terrorism and organized crime. Dr. Noura Youssef Mansouri is a sustainable energy enthusiast and professional. She currently holds the position of Senior Research Associate at King Abdullah's Petroleum Studies and Research Center and maintains the status of visiting scholar at MIT's Mechanical Engineering Department. In 2015, she received the Women's Excellence Leadership Award under the category Rising Stars, and she's been appointed a future energy leader at the World Energy Council. Ria Siddiqui is the founder and managing partner of Denham Capital and has over 38 years of experience in investments, energy, and asset management fields. He currently serves on the board of directors of Endeavor Energy Holdings and Greens Energy Group, both Denham portfolio companies. Besides his business activities, he is also chairman of the board of the American Pakistan Foundation and leads the Alliance for Compassion and Tolerance. Evans Wadongo is CEO of Greenwise Energy Solutions, which provides cutting-edge African-designed renewable energy solutions in sub-Saharan Africa. At 19, he designed the first ever African-designed solar lamp, dubbed Mwanga Bora. He is also the founder of Sustainable Development for All, an organization dedicated to providing help to thousands of mostly rural people dealing with poverty.
Good morning. Salam alaikum, everybody, for this session on the planet Earth. I have to say, things have changed in Saudi Arabia. I've been chairing events here for the last 15 years. And I can recall, if you ever tried to do a session of this weight at 9 a.m., you were pretty much sunk, right? Noura would say that. You'd have maybe 50, 60, 100 people come in, and then they'd wander in over time. So first, congratulations for being so attentive at the Misk Global Forum. And it's great to see the youth engage day after day after day here. Every time I have a conversation with somebody in the hall, I kind of stand with amazement thinking that the Crown Prince has unleashed the power of a new generation. So speaking of the generations, often defined today as Generation Z, a generation that thinks very different than my generation, of course, and one that cares deeply about economic policy and the destruction we've seen over the last 150 years. We were talking in the green room about planet Earth being over 4 billion years old and what has happened in the last 50 years. And this is one subject I would think that everybody has a unanimous opinion about, that we need to do something about it. With the exception of one individual, I think it's our president, but if I mentioned it, it would be defined as fake news. We won't go in that direction. Fair? Correct? Yes, correct. We try not to be the fake news organizations. But that list of fake news organizations, by the way, has gotten very long. It's not just CNN anymore. It's all the most credible news organizations in the world. I don't want to take the time with my introductions, but just to give you a quick format, about 10 minutes into the discussion, after our fantastic keynote that's going to take place, we want to raise the lights and, like we did yesterday, take questions from the floor, particularly here from that Generation Z about what they think should be happening when it comes to economic policy. You saw the bios for everybody. This is a fantastic mix of experts, but I stand humbled to introduce our keynote speaker. If I gave you a list of her long resume, we'd be here for the entire 38 minutes we have for the panel, right? I think that's fair. Dr. Sylvia Earle has, let me just give you a few of them because we couldn't fit in on the bio. 150 awards, 29 honorary doctorate degrees. It's probably gone up since they wrote the bio. 100 expeditions and 7,000 hours underwater. Does somebody know about the oceans better than the person we have in front of us today? Let's give her a warm welcome, Dr. Sylvia Earle. to the Misk Global Forum.
Well, thanks to all of you for coming from all parts of the world to address the challenge of change. This is a moment in time, as never before, maybe as never again, when we have an opportunity, armed with knowledge that not only did not exist, but could not exist when I was a child. So the young people of today have an edge over all of those who preceded us. Even 500 years ago, when Galileo got into trouble with his colleagues, his friends, his associates, his family even, because he dared to say Earth is not the center of the universe. I want to draw your attention to this image. We are the first in all of human history to really know what stars are made of. There's some really intelligent creatures other than humans on Earth. Think of elephants, dolphins, whales, cats, dogs, horses, whatever. They may wonder, what are those shiny things up in the sky? But we have knowledge. There's a lot we don't know about what's up there, but given what was not known before the present time, we should have humility and respect for Earth, that little blue speck, mostly blue, as astronauts have noted, from high in the sky, unlike our sister planet, the red one, also beautiful, also a speck in that sparkling sky. But it's only now, really, just about this point in history, when we have begun to understand the big issues of who are we, where did we come from, where might we be going, and how might we get to that place that we aspire to reach, sustainable use, perhaps even a modest amount of growth of our population, now 7 billion, almost four times what it was when I arrived. We look at the Earth as if it's ours to use. We are the center of the universe, right? Well, now we know that we're a part of, not apart from, nature, that everything we care about really depends on showing respect for the natural world. When I was a child, it was thought that the ocean was too big to fail. We could put anything into it, take anything out of it that we wished, and the ocean would continue doing whatever the ocean had done before. But on my watch, on your watch too, consider that on the order of 90% of many of the big fish that we love to consume are already gone. Tunas, cod, swordfish, groupers, you name it. They're in trouble. Half the coral reefs have either disappeared or are in a state of sharp decline since the 1980s. Seagrasses, marshes, mangroves, all of them, critical aspects of what an astronaut would look at Earth and say, it's our life support system. We do not make the air that we breathe. That happens as a consequence of photosynthesis, that magical process that was not original on Earth when first formed, but over the years steadily has altered the basic rocks, the basic atmosphere, largely carbon dioxide in the early days, modified and relied on the existence of that magical substance, water. 97% of Earth's water is ocean. And it's only right about now, early in the 21st century, as humans measure time, that, or at least as some humans measure time, that we're beginning to appreciate the value of that vast blue space that truly dominates the living world. And the ocean, we now know, is alive from the surface to the greatest depths. But it wasn't until 1960 that two people actually went to the deepest part of the ocean, and it's only 11 kilometers down, about the same height that I traveled in the sky getting here yesterday from the other side of the planet. Technology that now enables us to gain images such as this is cause for hope, because now we can see, can know, can have the perspective to realize our capacity to alter the nature of nature. So why should we care? If you like to breathe, you'll listen up, because what we're putting into the atmosphere, carbon dioxide in excess, is changing the chemistry of the ocean. Carbonic acid is being formed out of that carbon dioxide that is excess in the ocean. Change the chemistry of the ocean, you change everything, including the generation of oxygen. One of the things that we now have the capacity with our technologies to measure is that the ocean is now short on oxygen as compared to just 50 years ago. There's a steady decline with acidification, with the depletion of fish, with the other changes that we are imposing on the ocean, on the atmosphere, on the natural world generally. The assets that we rely on to keep us alive, our highest priority must be to keep the world safe so that we can do all the other things that we care about. And what do you care about? Your health, the economy, prosperity, the next generation? I can look back over decades that have marked the most rapid time of learning in all of human history. We've learned more about the ocean, about who we are, about the universe beyond, but we've also lost more. It has cost us so much in terms of drawing down the natural assets to get to where we are, but the good news is now we know. The great news is, in spite of the worries about 7 billion people and 7 billion appetites, 7 billion people to clothe and feed, have space, have room and an opportunity to realize their own dreams for the future. There are also 7 billion minds that are now connected in ways that could not have happened 50 years ago or even 5 years ago. The pace is picking up. It's like a race. Can we learn enough soon enough and act upon that knowledge to realize that we really must take care of the systems that take care of us, that the most important thing we extract from the ocean is our existence. The most important thing we extract from nature. So what can we do about it? 100 years ago, nations around the world began to wake up to the losses on the land. Wake up to the importance of protecting forests, deserts, wildlife. It's only fairly recently, like only last June, that the United Nations had a focused meeting on the ocean. It was only with the Paris negotiations about climate that the ocean finally got onto the balance sheet. We are so terrestrial in our orientation, even here in this beautiful desert country. There is a lot of ocean that borders the desert that is still largely unknown, unexplored, like most of the ocean around the world. Only about 10% has been mapped with the same degree of accuracy that we have for the moon, for Mars, for Jupiter. What are we thinking? Now we have a chance. And this group of young minds and seasoned experts gathered together can make a difference. If not now, what are we waiting for to really explore the natural world, explore the ocean? In the 1960s, we began to seriously look skyward in ways that were not possible before. The first astronauts looked back and saw Earth with new eyes. There's a new generation looking in the other direction, but the technologies to go deep in the sea are lagging far behind. Exploitation is moving rapidly, exploration very slowly. So one of the things that I would like to suggest as a challenge to you is to think about what each of us can do with everyday decisions, and collectively as well, to take into account the importance of the natural world, the mandate that we have now to explore, to get to know the ocean, to appreciate the value of the living assets that make everything else that we care about possible. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Can I ask a very crude question? How young are you?
About 12.
Okay, good. Certainly your spirit, that's for sure, huh? Incredible. What a sharp mind, ad-libbing speeches and after spending that much time exploring. That's a great way to define what we're talking about here, because I always find when it comes to oceans, we don't know enough, right? We don't know the exploitation enough, the super trawlers that are going around digging things up. But I got to bring in our panel because we have 25 minutes together. So Sylvia, I'll circle back to you in terms of the policies that are related to it. Dr. Noor, I was going to bring you into the conversation first, and the link here to Saudi Arabia. A lot of people think of Saudi Arabia as one of the largest oil producers of the world, and it's the largest oil exporter. But I think it'd be a shame if we did not acknowledge what's taking place, for example, at Aramco today. Nuclear policy development, renewable development, diversification of energy sources, and how this is being embraced by the youth in this audience today. Is it known here, this push now, an awakening that Dr. Earl was talking about, to not be overly reliant on carbon fossil fuels here in the kingdom?
Absolutely, John. I think Saudi Arabia has always been blamed for the oil, even though we powered the building of the civilization around the world. I think having a panel like this one is indicative that the direction has changed, and this is a chance for the youth also to take part in this grand transition towards sustainability and clean energy. The kingdom has announced its plans for diversifying the energy mix, including renewable energy, specifically solar and wind as a first phase, and nuclear was also mentioned as part of the vision. I spent 3 years working on the nuclear sector here in the kingdom, and I know that there are plans to diversify the energy mix and have and participate in the lower carbon economy. We're also participating in environmental in the COP meeting, for example. Our minister was there, and we're becoming more engaged in talking about sustainability, reducing carbon emissions. The announcement of NEOM is by itself an amazing milestone. Aiming for a zero carbon city is a very brave step, I would say.
Right. That sits for our international visitors. The concept is on the borders of Egypt and Jordan, which creates economic development in that part of the kingdom as well, which is forward-thinking, no doubt. Deborah, I think we should probably start with your experience in the World Trade Organization and the negotiations, because that was all about trade and didn't have the component of environmental protection in it. You're watching China very carefully. Obviously, if you're worried about environmental policy, you'd have to focus on China and India because of the population impact, and then the emerging markets of Africa and Southeast Asia as well. What are we seeing in China now to address exactly what we're talking about here?
Certainly. I mean, it's no secret that China is the world's largest emitter of CO2, and one of the issues that is of concern is China's new plan for the Belt and Road Initiative. And through that, what it's going to do is cover 65 countries. It is going to be 3/4 of the world's population, and the important thing is it's going to be a driver of infrastructure development. Why is that important? Because buildings are the largest single emitter of CO2 emissions. That is concerning, but it's also good news. And fortunately, China recognizes that. And President Xi Jinping, particularly now that he has consolidated his leadership through the 19th Party Congress, has made cleaning up the environment not just in China, but also along the Belt and Road a top priority. At the Paulson Institute, which is where I'm vice chairman, we have been working with the Chinese government in starting to develop what voluntary principles would be along this Belt and Road, so that as China is doing also the infrastructure financing for this, and there's about $5 trillion needed each year in infrastructure financing across these countries, so it's significant numbers.
Did you say $5 trillion?
$5 trillion.
Wow,
and there's only about $1 trillion available. There's going to be a significant need for private sector capital to be part of that. And if we can develop what are the voluntary principles along that, we can make a significant difference in what the CO2 emissions are. For buildings, it's simple things. It can even just be as simple as the type of window that you use or the type of insulation that you use. So there is hope, and there is hope of creating, and we've seen this through some of the innovative green financing that's coming out of the G20 and China's big initiative of creating public-private sector partnerships and developing creative models for attracting private sector financing for a lot of this public building that's going to be going on.
Okay, let's bring in the two that are involved in finance at the bookend of our arc here. Riaz Siddiqui is the founder of Denim Capital. You talk about, and it links directly to what Deborah was suggesting, engaging to put private equity capital at play for environmental purposes. What's the work you're doing? And then we'll bring in Evans there.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My thanks to His Royal Highness Mohammed bin Salman, Badr al-Askar, and then of course MiSK Foundation and you, John. I have to acknowledge watching you from the US introduce Muslims and the Middle East to us in the developed part of the world. I got to say, this gentleman deserves a round of applause, so if you will join me.
Thanks very much. I was going to ask you to cut short the congratulations, but when you included my name, I said go as long as you want.
I figured. Anyway,
nice
so let me just pick up on the challenge here and also tell you the opportunity with respect to capital provision. The challenges that Dr. Earl and Deborah spoke about in Noura require us to have much more long-term thinking than typical capital providers are willing to accept. Which really means that you all, the youth of this nation and the youth around the world, have to devise an economic model that is different from the economic model of today. So what is the economic model of today? It's basically Adam Smith economics, which is marginal supply curves, marginal demand curves intersect, there is a market clearing price, and the most able survive, the less able don't. Well, what we're talking about over here is a model of economics that has Adam Smith on one side, it has pure philanthropy on the other side. Notable example of that, Bill Gates. Notable example of that, His Royal Highness Mohammed bin Salman. And then in the middle, there is social entrepreneurship. So what I've done now, I've dedicated my life ever since my granddaughter Zainab Khan was born, March 23rd of 2015. Is to work with youth on the development of this more fulsome economic model where certainly today's capital, commercial capital that requires cash flow to start very soon after a project is underway survives. But on the other side, there's a whole bunch of capital that is much more long-term and patient in its expectations of cash flow, which is what is going to be needed to tackle the problems of climate change, which have been 150 years or 200 years in the making, and which will take decades and possibly centuries to resolve.
Okay, there's been $350 billion going into the renewable space in the last 5 years. Quite extraordinary. I'm curious to hear from Evans Wadongo from Kenya and Greenwise Energy, whether there is, as Riaz was suggesting here, the patience to see the return on capital for projects, because there's another driving force here is protecting the planet. But do investors get it or not, Evans?
I want to agree with Siddiq that I think we need more patient capital to go into renewable energy and other sustainability projects. But I think it has to be a combination coming from private sector, but also governments. Right now we have the concept of green bonds that is being propagated a lot, where governments can issue such kind of bonds which can attract investments from private sector and even international finance institutions. And that money can form a basis for providing this patient capital on a larger scale, or to scale up renewable energy projects that are being implemented. And this is very critical, especially in emerging economies and even in developing countries. For example, in Africa, we have very few patient capital that you're talking about. Most of the capital is coming in, comes in from investors based in the West who want to come in and make quick bucks for a short period. So
I don't think China's in the West, though, Evans. I think they're pretty prevalent in Kenya. Wouldn't you
yes,
say?
yes.
Let's not leave that big economy out of the Kenyan equation.
Yes, it's of course, China is also included. It's not just the West only, but all these kind of investors are interested in making profits over a short period. And so we need more government involvement in creating this capital needed to support these renewable energy projects.
Okay, very good. I want to touch on a couple other things, but I want to bring the lights up if we can. And our fantastic ushers here that have been so quick off the mark. Can you raise your numbers? There you go. Just a second. I'm going to ask a couple quick questions of the panel. And then where's number one on this side, if we can, with the microphone? Perfect. Thanks very much. And we'll come to the audience in just a moment. Deborah, I think we need to spend at least a minute on your drive to protect antiquities. Oh. This phenomenal awareness that's taking place after the disastrous catastrophe of Palmyra. Can you give us a minute of what you've founded and what you started here, and you hope the awareness continues even after the hoped destruction of ISIS?
Great. I'd be thrilled and delighted. After the Arab Spring in Egypt, we found that there was mass looting going on of the archaeological sites, and it was pretty clear that this wasn't just a problem that was unique to Egypt, and it wasn't actually a problem that's just unique to the Middle East. Given all the heritage that's here, it's a problem that is many countries are suffering from globally. In China, 9 out of 10 tombs actually have been raided. And most of the people who are doing this are not just at the retail level. It's organized crime, and in many instances, it's terrorism that is driving this. There's a huge demand for these types of antiquities, particularly from this part of the world in the West, and increasingly in China. And so we have worked through an organization called the Antiquities Coalition to convene conferences every year. We started in Egypt and Jordan last year to explore regional solutions to this problem and how we can bring in the art market, the auction houses, the major dealers to start to raise their standards in terms of what they're selling.
Dr. Sylvia, I need some quich answers because we have 12 minutes left here. Are we really behind the curve, though? Are we just a reawakening of the crisis? I saw the COP23 and everybody's rushing to go to the next project. When it comes to the oceans, antiquities, private equity capital to rescue us, what's the reality? Can it be reversed or not?
I was a bit of antiquity myself. I am 82.
Oh.
So
a soul of 12 and a chronological age of 82. I like the 70-year gap. Huh?
About the other antiquities that we need to address. Sharks have been around for like 400 million years. And in my lifetime, actually since about the 1980s, they have been depleted by on the order of 90% globally. So that's real robbery, but we're robbing ourselves. We're taking from the natural capital that keeps us alive. Our life support system is at risk. But the good news is, there is, as there was early in the 20th century, a move now to consider blue parks, protection for the ocean. So I was with President George W. Bush when he signed for the United States the largest marine protected area on the planet. And then President Obama came along and quadrupled the size of that Papahanaumokuakea Marine Reserve near the Hawaiian Islands, part of the Hawaiian Islands. And next week, I will be with the President of Mexico when he actually finishes the proclamation of what will be an even larger part of the Pacific Ocean, the Rio Viejo Islands. So there's a trend moving in the right direction, but currently that's only 2% of the ocean where even the fish are safe.
Wow.
So if we are to be serious about protecting the systems that keep us alive, we have to do somewhat better than we are now. And it does relate to climate change, because every fish, like every tree, is a carbon-based unit. It captures, holds, and sequesters carbon in the deep sea, ultimately. And we know these things now. We just have to let the policies catch up with the knowledge that we have. And we need more.
Great. I want to go straight to the floor here. Let's go to question 1, and we'll come to question 2. I ask you to be super direct, right? And to direct it to somebody on the panel. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Christopher Wilhelmi. I'm a student from Columbia Business School. And first, thank you all for coming here and being so active in trying to stop climate change. My question is as following. We know that we need more efforts from the government, from private sectors, to reduce increasing temperatures that are having more natural disasters in terms of magnitude and reducing biodiversity. My questions for you is basically, do you think we will be able to mitigate increasing temperatures, and if we will be able to do this on time before we stop losing biodiversity and affecting the planet?
That's the huge critical question. Riaz, Dr. Nora? Please, go ahead, Riaz.
You can go first.
Okay, well, that is the question of the time. That is the question of time. Do we have enough time? By some accounts, we're already past that time. And by some accounts, we still have time to catch up. Now, my answer to that is that we all as a people have to live by Apple's motto, which is, the journey is the reward. The journey is the reward. We really don't know whether we will survive as a species or not. But what we have to do, and what I'd encourage you to do, is think about somebody most dear to you, whether it's your mother, hopefully it's somebody, a younger brother, and say, I'm going to do it for him or her. And then we have to resolve to do everything in our power to reverse this trend. That's my answer.
Great. Nura, let me add a layer to the question. We had this discussion in the back between the 6 of us. The connection between religion and preserving God's creation. I shared something with His Holiness Patriarch Bartholomew about this very subject, the Orthodox leader. You said the tenets of Islam make reference to this. Buddhism obviously makes reference to this. Can we make the connection so it's in our forefront of our minds and not something, and in our soul, as Dr. Sylvia's pointed to? What are your thoughts in that strand?
Yeah, for sure. So sustainability and protecting the environment is in our Islamic teaching. The natural resources are gifts given to us, and it's a responsibility to protect it. We should protect the environment, conserve the use of energy and water and every natural resource that we have, and make sure that we hand it into the next generation intact. I also want to draw on our individual efforts. So the government is important. I know it's not a very, it's a bleak future when we talk about the climate change and the impacts of climate change. But if every one of us here in this room, we're all fortunate in one way or another, if we took it upon ourselves and changed our lifestyle, or at least became more conscious and mindful of what we're doing. So just to share with you, for example, today, coming here by car from Capsark, where I live and work, I emitted 0.01 metric tons of CO2. And in the 5-minute shower that I had this morning, I used more water than an average person who's living in the slums in a developing country uses the whole day. And just when I started talking, another child died of a water-related illness. On the other hand, John, flying from Abu Dhabi, you probably emitted 0.33 metric tons of CO2, so the size of a camel. So what do? I think the rule is reduce what you can, but offset what you can't. And by offset, I mean there are so many ways that you can offset these carbon emissions, like planting a tree, recycling, researching renewables, or moderating a session like this and hopefully inspiring people to take action.
Yeah, in fact, one of the events I chaired recently, somebody said, before we break the session, I have to say, we have a plastic bottle. If you're going to open a plastic bottle and have the water, make sure it's finished. If you didn't finish it, take it with you, because it's absolute crime to leave a half a bottle of water. We can share anytime you want. That's mine, but I'd be happy if you share my glass,
into a
girl.
glass container.
Good. Thanks for your patience, sir.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. I'm very...
Okay, I have to ask you to be just no thanks, but just get to the question, yeah?
Okay.
We have limited time, unfortunately.
Thanks for Dr. Errol. Her lecture was simple, but they call it in Arabic untouchable simplicity, السهل الممتنع. My suggestions for Saudi Arabia, there are two cities, Jubail Industrial City and Yambo Industrial City. They have very sophisticated environment rule and regulation developed by the Royal Commission. It's a government agency. We need to publicize those rules and regulations for all area in Saudi Arabia. By that, I'm a practitioner. I believe we can create very, very sophisticated environment improvement. Thank you very much.
Terrific. What are the two cities again? I didn't quite hear you.
Jubail Industrial City in the Arabian Gulf, and Yambo Industrial City on the Red Sea.
On the Red Sea, of course.
And both they have very, very sophisticated environment rule and regulation. It's free of charge. It's not confidential. Everyone he can approach those. They are available, printed 2 volumes. I was familiar with them because they were nagging with me for conformity and non-conformity in the industry. And there are 2 volumes, one for the residential and one for the industrial. And everyone can have access to it. They are developed by the government of Saudi Arabia. And we learn a lot of sophisticated research being done in California long time ago.
Great.
So please.
Thank you very much. Excellent.
Thank you.
I followed the Yambu project because of the cooperation between China and Saudi Aramco, which is a mere 400,000 barrels a day of refining capacity. Pretty extraordinary. I think this will be the last question from the floor. Number 1. Do you have somebody there? Yeah, go ahead. That's you. If you can stand, thank you.
Yes. Nasiba Ben Ghanem from Georgetown, United States. My question is for Dr. Al-Mansouri. Are you aware of any recycling efforts on the ground here on Riyadh? And if not, why not? It just really breaks my heart to throw a plastic water bottle in the trash.
Thank you for the question. I can talk. I think it's changing drastically. So I'll talk about CAPSARC, which is King Abdullah Petroleum Studies and Research Center, where I live and work. So it's a center that researches energy and clean energy, but we also walk the walk, not just talk the talk, because recycling is everywhere. It's in our household, it's in the offices even. Every office has a recycling center, so we're very big on sustainability. The building is very efficient. Recycling is done in every household, and there are recycling centers as well. I know that recycling has not spread out of all of Riyadh. I remember there are some recycling centers, but you'll have to bring it yourself, so it's not very convenient. And I hope that this is a chance to spread the awareness on recycling, and if there is demand, then there will definitely be supply. So change really starts with the individual, and if we all demand it, I'm sure there will be more outlets. Thank you.
Good. I only have a minute left. I'm going to ask Evans and Riaz, give us 30 seconds each for a summary of what we learned here today, because it's a fairly complex mix on a panel, but a lot of really interesting themes have already emerged and interesting questions as well. Please.
I think really we need to understand that protecting the environment is a responsibility for all of us, whether governments, individual citizens, young people, women, and specifically we need to bring on board women more in protecting the environment. And I want to applaud the Kingdom for allowing women to drive, because we need to have less cars on the road. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. So let's make this consequential. We have challenges, but we have opportunities. Those opportunities are going to be commercial. They're going to require patient capital. So let's do this. Come up with ideas, and I will fund pre-seed 10 companies to the tune of $10,000 each, to then apply for that to be one of those 100 that will be funded by MiSK and Bill Gates Foundation. So it's my offer to you.
I was wondering why you wanted to summarize. You put save the headline to the last, as we say. So how do they get in touch with you very quickly before we wrap?
713-817-3404. Text WhatsApp.
Great. That's
US.
A great place to leave it. We have a very humble group here. We could spend a half hour with each one of you, honestly, with the work that you're doing. Evans himself is a CNN hero. I didn't want to bury that headline. But at 19, designed solar lamps to provide solutions in Africa. So we hold a candle out to you, and we don't have to repeat what you've been doing through the years. Deborah, I followed through the WTO, and Dr. Noor, I've watched at CAPSARC as it emerges as a leading hub for energy research as well. A nice round of applause to everybody. Thanks a lot for the panel.